My husband's family will live here now, my daughter said, standing in my own doorway. So get out. I stared at her stunned. Where do you expect me to go? She didn't even blink. Go to the dump. So I left, not broken, not defeated, but with a quiet smile. Because I knew something she didn't. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. 7 days later, they lost everything, the house, the money, and the illusion that I was disposable. Before we go on, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We bring you new stories every day. Hit like and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there in the comments. The phone rang just as I finished carefully washing my lunch dishes. The shrill, insistent tone cut sharply through the afternoon silence of my empty house, making me jump slightly, my heart beating just a little faster. My hands were still damp when I reached for it immediately, recognizing Ralene's number glowing on the screen. My heart lifted in an instant. She had not called in 2 long months. Dad, her voice sounded different somehow, softer and sweeter than usual. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Rylene, honey? I could not hide my excitement. You are never interrupting. It is so good to hear your voice. She laughed, but it felt strangely rehearsed, as if she had practiced it beforehand. I have a surprise for you. We are coming over tonight. Trent and I, along with his parents, we want to have a conversation with you. I set down the dish towel, my engineer's mind automatically calculating the implications. Tonight, that is wonderful. I have not seen you in such a long while. Should I make dinner? I could even pick up that wine. You like the Pinot Noir from that little vineyard we visited together. Do not worry about food, Dad. Her tone became firmer now, almost commanding. Just be ready for us around 7. This is important. Something in her voice made me pause, but my loneliness overrode my caution. Of course, sweetheart. I will make sure everything is perfect. Will you be staying the night? I can prepare the guest rooms. We will see how the evening goes. She cut me off gently. I have to run now, but we will see you at 7 sharp. Okay. The line went dead before I could ask more questions. I stood there holding the phone, replaying her words. A surprise, a conversation. The phrase felt oddly formal, but maybe she was finally ready to bridge the gap that had grown between us since her mother died. Maybe this was the reconciliation I had been hoping for. I glanced at my watch. 2:45 in the afternoon, 4 hours to prepare. The house suddenly felt alive with possibility. I walked through each room with renewed purpose, seeing it through Rylene's eyes. The living room needed vacuuming. The bathroom required fresh towels. I moved with the systematic precision that had served me well through 40 years of engineering projects. First, I drove to the grocery store on Cedar Avenue. The March air was crisp, promising spring, but still carrying winter's sharp edge. I selected a bouquet of yellow daffodils, Ralene's favorite since childhood, and added a bottle of the Pinot Noir she had mentioned loving last Christmas. In the bakery section, I found delicate individual chocolate tarts, the kind she used to beg for during our weekend trips to Powell's Books. Back home, I arranged the flowers in my wife's crystal vase, the one Ralene had always admired. The afternoon light streaming through the kitchen window made them glow like small suns. I set the dining room table with our good china, the set we had bought for special occasions that had become far too rare. While wiping down the counters, I found myself humming something I had not done in months. The house felt different, quietly expectant. I pulled out old photo albums, thinking we might look through them together. There was Ralene at 5, gap-toothed and grinning in her yellow dress. Rylene at 16, rolling her eyes at my camera, but smiling despite herself. Rylene on her wedding day, radiant in white silk. I paused at that last photo. Trent stood beside her, handsome in his rented tuxedo, but something about his smile had always seemed hollow to me. His parents flanked them. Dorian with his practiced businessman's grin. Selma with her perpetual look of mild disapproval. They had never quite accepted me, the simple engineer who had worked his way up from nothing. But tonight would be different. Tonight, we were family coming together. I showered and put on my best casual shirt, the blue one Ralene once said brought out my eyes. In the mirror, I saw a man trying to look younger than his 62 years, hope making his face brighter. My grey hair was neatly combed. My expression was optimistic. At 6:30, I did a final walkthrough. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and fresh flowers. The wine was breathing quietly on the sideboard. The chocolate tarts waited on bone china plates. Everything was finally ready for whatever surprise my daughter had planned. I settled carefully into my favorite chair by the window, watching for headlights on Maple Street. The anticipation felt almost like Christmas morning, that delicious tension of waiting for something truly wonderful to unfold. Outside, the streetlights began flickering on in the gathering dusk, glowing faintly against the shadows. 7 o'clock was now only minutes away. Car doors slammed shut outside sharp in the quiet evening air. I checked my reflection one last time in the hallway mirror, smoothing my hair with steady hands. Through the frosted glass, I could make out 4 silhouettes approaching my front door. My heart hammered with a mixture of anticipation and unease. I opened the door before they could even knock, my face breaking into what I hoped was a warm, welcoming smile. Rylene. Trent. Rylene stood on my doorstep in a long black coat that made her look as if she were attending a funeral. Her face was composed, distant, unreadable. No smile, no hug. "Hello, Dad." Her voice carried none of the warmth from our earlier phone call. Trent pushed past her, reeking of alcohol. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw set in a tense and aggressive line. Behind them, Dorian and Selma Holden flanked my doorway like bodyguards wrapped in expensive coats. Come in. I have prepared dinner. I have opened that wine you love. We will not be staying for dinner." Selma Holden swept into my living room without invitation, her sharp eyes already cataloguing my furniture, my belongings every corner. She touched my wife's crystal vase dismissively. Such cheap flowers. I blinked, confused. I bought Rylene's favorites, the daffodils. "Dad, we need to talk." Rylene finally looked at me, but her eyes were cold as January rain. "Sit down." Dorian Holden had pulled out his phone and was photographing my kitchen, my dining room. The camera clicked methodically, each sound cutting into me. I watched him bewildered. "What is he doing?" "Assessing the property value," Selma said matter-of-factly. She settled into my wife's favorite chair like she already owned it. "Now my son's family will live here, so get out." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the back of the sofa. "What I do not understand, where this is my house. I have lived here for 30 years. Rylene's voice cut through my protest like ice. "Go to the dump if you want. We need this house." Trent stepped closer, his breath sharp with whiskey. "We already arranged things with the police. Do not make trouble." I stared at my daughter, searching her face for any trace of the child I had raised, the woman I had loved unconditionally. Nothing. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Worse, like I was an obstacle. "Rylene, sweetheart. I do not understand what is happening. Is this about money? If you need help, you are leaving tonight." Selma's voice broke no argument. "We will give you 1 hour to pack essentials." My legs gave out. I sank into the sofa, my mind reeling. The chocolate tart sat untouched on the dining table. The wine breathed uselessly in its crystal decanter. Everything I had prepared with such hope seemed to mock me now. "This is my home," I whispered. Dorian Holden finished his photography and slipped his phone away. "Not anymore. Rylene is our daughter-in-law. Family takes care of family." The irony was not lost on me. I looked slowly around the room at 4 full decades of memories, at the life I had carefully built with my late wife, at the home where I had raised Rylene with such love and devotion. Now they stood in my living room like intruders, dividing up my very existence. I studied Rylene's face one more time. This woman who had called me only 6 hours ago, who had spoken of surprises and conversations, who had let me believe for a single afternoon that I still mattered. Something cold settled deep in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something much more dangerous: calculation. "All right," I said quietly. The room went silent, the air thick. They had expected tears, pleading, maybe desperation. Selma's eyebrows rose. Trent's aggressive posture faltered slightly. I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out my old leather briefcase. "I will pack some things." The silence stretched between us like a taut humming wire. They had expected sobbing, begging, maybe a storm of rage. Instead, I moved to my bedroom with the same methodical precision that had served me through 40 years of engineering projects. I pulled my worn suitcase from the closet shelf. The leather was cracked and tired, but the latches still worked perfectly. Everything had its purpose, its proper place. "All right, I will go." My voice surprised them, calm, steady, measured. "But remember," I added, "I have been an engineer my whole life. I know how to build things." I folded my best shirts with mechanical precision, then paused. "But I also know how to tear them down." Raylene shifted uncomfortably. "What do you mean by that?" I looked up from my packing, meeting her eyes for the first time since their arrival. "Nothing, daughter. Just wishing you happiness in your new home." From the living room, Selma's voice carried sharp and victorious, finally showing some sense. I continued packing bank statements from the filing cabinet, insurance papers. The deed to the house, though, what good it would do me now, I could not say. Behind them, my engineering certifications and professional references, 40 years of careful documentation of my life's work. Raylene lingered in the doorway, watching me work. Perhaps some small part of her felt guilt. But when Trent called her name from the kitchen, she turned away. I packed Maribeth's photograph, the one from our anniversary dinner 3 years ago. Her smile radiated a warmth that seemed impossible in this cold house, now full of strangers who shared my blood. 20 minutes. That was all it took to pack a lifetime. I wheeled the suitcase through the living room, where my former family, watched me like vultures, observing dying prey. Dorian had resumed photographing, now focusing on the more expensive pieces. Selma sat in Maribeth's chair, already arranging the throw pillows differently, as if to erase her presence. "The utilities are in my name," I said quietly. "You will need to transfer them. We will handle everything." Dorian replied without looking up from his phone. I paused at the front door, studying the faces of people I had loved, supported, sacrificed for. Raylene avoided my gaze. Trent swayed slightly, reaching for the wine I had opened in celebration. Selma examined my wife's crystal collection with calculating eyes. Well then, I adjusted my grip on the suitcase handle. "I suppose this is goodbye." None of them responded. The evening air felt sharp against my face. March in Portland carried winter's last bite, but something about the cold cleared my thoughts. I loaded the suitcase into my Honda's trunk, the car Maribeth and I had bought together 5 years ago. Still reliable, still serving its purpose. I drove through familiar neighborhoods that no longer felt like home. Past the elementary school where I had dropped Raylene off countless mornings, past the park where we had celebrated her graduation, past the grocery store where I had shopped for tonight's rejected dinner. The ATM glowed harsh white in the parking lot of a 24-hour convenience store. I inserted my card with steady fingers, checking my account balance, pension deposits, Social Security. Savings accumulated over decades of careful living, not wealthy but sufficient, more than they had expected probably. The Sunrise Inn sat along a busy commercial strip about 15 minutes from my former neighborhood. Budget accommodation certainly, but clean enough and reliable. The desk clerk, a young woman with tired eyes that looked like they had seen too many late nights, processed my registration without a trace of curiosity. Cash payment for 3 nights, room 237. The room smelled strongly of industrial carpet cleaner and contained everything necessary for temporary survival. A single bed, a small table, an aging television, and a bathroom stocked with thin towels and tiny soap bars. I sat carefully on the bed's edge and opened my laptop. Time to solve a problem. Morning light filtered through the motel's thin curtains, harsh and unfamiliar. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then yesterday's betrayal crashed back into me like cold water. I opened my laptop again and logged into my online banking. The numbers glowed steady on the screen. Pension deposits, Social Security, decades of careful savings, more than enough for what I now needed to do. Then I accessed the joint account Raylene and I had opened when she was 16, her very first checking account. With my name still listed as co-owner, she had never removed me. Probably forgot it even existed. The balance made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. 30 years I gave and gave and gave, I murmured to the empty room. Now it is time to take back everything that belongs to me. I closed the laptop and showered in the motel's cramped bathroom. The hot water felt like clarity itself. No more confusion, no more hurt feelings, just engineering precision applied to a very specific problem. By 9:30, I was standing in TechMart's fluorescent bright aisles. The young clerk with purple hair barely looked up from her phone. "I need a prepaid phone," I told her. Something basic and a cheap laptop for travel. She led me to the electronics wall, pointing out options with practiced boredom. I selected a simple flip phone and a basic laptop, both paid for in cash. No credit cards, no digital trail, nothing linking back to Alban Merrick. Setting up a home office, she asked, making conversation while ringing up the purchase. Remote work, I replied. Consulting. Close enough to the truth. The real estate office occupied a converted house on Division Street. Winner Greaves, according to her nameplate, looked up from her computer with the bright smile of someone who lived on commission. How can I help you today? I need a modest apartment, 1-bedroom month-to-month lease if possible. I settled into the chair across from her desk. I work online, so good internet is essential. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Budget range. I named a figure that made her smile widen. Not extravagant, but comfortable. The kind of tenant landlords quietly preferred. I have several options. This unit on Hawthorne has fiber optic internet. Perfect for remote work. When would you like to move in today, if possible? She blinked, then smiled again. That is ambitious. But I like ambition. Let me make some calls. 2 hours later, I signed a lease for a clean 1-bedroom apartment 12 blocks from my former home. Close enough for reconnaissance, far enough to avoid accidental encounters. Winner handed me the keys with professional efficiency. The internet should be active by tomorrow morning. Anything else you need to know about the neighborhood, just where to find good coffee. She laughed and recommended 3 cafes within easy walking distance. The apartment smelled strongly of fresh paint and industrial carpet, the kind that left no trace of the lives that might come after. Empty rooms, echoed with possibility and with the strange silence of a new beginning. I set my suitcase carefully in the bedroom and unpacked my laptop on the kitchen counter. The afternoon sun slanted through spotless windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny particles taking shape. I opened my new laptop and began methodically making lists, resources available, timeline requirements, information needed, Phase 1 clear objectives. Outside Portland hummed with the ordinary business of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Inside, however, I began building something extraordinary, something they would never even imagine coming. I pulled out my phone, my old phone, and scrolled through Rylene's contact information. Her work number, Trent's cell, the Holden family's home address, which was now considered my former address. So much information, so many vulnerabilities waiting to be mapped. I cracked my knuckles and started typing. Wednesday morning arrived with the same methodical precision I had always applied to complex engineering projects. My apartment had transformed overnight into something resembling a compact command center. 4 manila folders sat neatly arranged on the kitchen table, each labeled with a name, Rylene, Trent, Dorian, Selma. I opened my laptop and began filling in what I already knew. Rylene's work addressed her favorite lunch spots, her predictable routines. Trent's construction job site and his after-work patterns. The Holden parents' temporary address, my former address. But knowledge gaps still remained. I needed specifics, vulnerabilities, pressure points. Thursday evening found me nursing a ginger ale at the Riverside Casino's dimly lit bar. The bartender, a chatty woman named Joellen Pierce with graying roots, kept the conversation flowing as naturally as the drink she poured. "That guy Trent comes here often?" I asked, nodding toward the blackjack tables where my son-in-law sat hunched over his cards. "Oh yeah." Joellen's eyes followed my gaze. "Lost quite a bit here these past weeks. Says he will pay up soon when he sells a house." I sipped my ginger ale, slowly watching Trent's increasingly desperate gestures as his chips disappeared. Sounds like he is confident about that sale. Hope so for his sake. Joellen lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Some of these guys do not like waiting, if you know what I mean." Trent stumbled slightly, getting up from the table, his face flushed with alcohol and frustration. I photographed him from across the room with my new camera's zoom lens, clear shots of his condition, his behavior, his companions. Evidence. Friday morning, I followed Trent to his construction site downtown. He worked for Henderson Development, a mid-sized company, with offices in a glass building on 3rd Avenue. At 11:30, he emerged for what appeared to be an extended lunch break. He was not alone. The woman was perhaps 30, auburn-haired, wearing a tailored business suit that suggested she earned more than Trent ever would. They walked close together, his hand occasionally brushing her back in a way that spoke of intimacy rather than friendship. I photographed them from across the street, their body language, her hand on his arm, the kiss she gave him before they parted ways at her car. More evidence. That afternoon, I visited the Multnomah County Clerk's office. Public records revealed the scope of Dorian Holden's financial catastrophe with clinical precision. Failed investment in a restaurant chain. Tax liens totaling $43,000, a business license that had been suspended for non-payment of state fees. The Holden family was not just desperate, they were drowning without a lifeline. Back in my apartment that evening, I spread the photographs across my kitchen table alongside printed documents and handwritten notes. Trent's gambling debts and empty promises about house sale proceeds, his affair with someone who clearly had much to lose if exposed, Dorian's tax troubles, and suspended business license Selma's complete dependence on her husband's already compromised income. Each folder now contained more than enough ammunition to destroy its subject completely. I leaned back in my chair, studying the evidence with an engineer's satisfaction. Structural weaknesses identified load-bearing points located. The foundation of their so-called victory over me had far more cracks than they realized. My phone buzzed. The old phone with Rylene's contact information still intact. Time to begin the demolition. Saturday morning arrived with the same methodical clarity I'd always applied to structural engineering problems. I spread the intelligence files across my kitchen table once more, this time not for analysis, but for careful action sequence planning. Rylene first. Financial pressure would create immediate panic. Dorian second. Government investigation would consume his already limited resources. Trent third. His gambling debts and his affair provided multiple exploitable pressure points. Selma fourth. Her complete dependency meant she would collapse the moment the others fell. If your own family betrayed you so cruelly, leaving you to fight alone, share your feelings and experiences in the comments below and drop a number 1 if you can relate. By 10:30, I was sitting across from Kelvin Marsh, the branch manager at First National Bank, the same bank where Rylene and I had opened her first checking account 18 years ago. I need to modify the access permissions on this joint account, I told him, sliding the paperwork across his polished desk. Kelvin reviewed the documents with professional efficiency. These account modifications will take effect immediately, Mr. Alban Merrick. You are establishing yourself as the primary account holder with approval requirements for large withdrawals. Perfect. Please notify me of any access attempts. He nodded, making notes in the system. Would you like to set specific withdrawal limits for the secondary account holder? Yes. $200 daily maximum. Anything larger requires my written approval. Rylene would discover the restrictions the next time she tried to pay rent or buy groceries. The panic would be immediate and complete. After lunch, I found myself in the downtown office of Cullen Vexley, attorney at law. His diplomas covered one wall like certificates of competence, which I found oddly reassuring. I invested $23,000 in improvements to that house over the past 5 years, I explained, showing him the receipts I had carefully maintained. New roof foundation, work, kitchen renovation, all documented. Cullen studied the paperwork with the thoroughness that justified his hourly rate. You have legal rights to this house, Mr. Alban Merrick. You have invested significant money in the purchase and improvements. Excellent, but first I want them to understand their mistake themselves. He looked up from the documents, curiosity flickering in his professional expression. What do you mean, they took my house thinking I was helpless? I prefer they realize how wrong they were before I take legal action. That is an interesting approach, but your legal position is strong whenever you decide to proceed. Good. I will be in touch when the timing is right. My final stop was the Oregon Department of Revenue building on Commercial Street. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, accepted my manila envelope without particular interest. Anonymous submission of potential tax irregularities, she confirmed. Yes, Dorian Holden, business owner. Documentation of unreported income, questionable deductions, and suspended business licenses. She stamped the envelope and filed it in a basket marked "Investigation Required." Government bureaucracy would handle the rest with its own slow but relentless methodical precision. Back in my apartment by 5 o'clock, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, but the moment seemed to warrant a quiet celebration. Outside my window, Portland's evening lights began flickering on like tiny promises of what was to come, each one a small signal that the plan was moving forward. The first moves were now in play. Raylene would discover her financial restrictions within mere days. Dorian's tax investigation would begin to unfold within weeks. Trent's gambling debts would compound mercilessly with interest. I opened my laptop and began drafting the blueprint for the next phase of action. Monday morning arrived with the precise timing I had engineered for years. My phone buzzed with a text notification from the bank. Someone had attempted to access the restricted account. Multiple attempts, in fact. The timestamp showed 10:47 in the morning. Raylene had discovered her new reality. I poured myself coffee and opened my laptop, checking the bank's online activity log. 7 failed access attempts in just 15 minutes. 2 phone calls to customer service. 1 official request for immediate account review. All denied exactly as planned. My phone rang at 11:23, Raylene's number flashing. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message with the quiet satisfaction of an engineer watching a perfectly calibrated mechanism operate. Dad, it's Raylene. There's some kind of problem with our account. The bank says you have restricted access. Please call me back immediately. This has to be a mistake. The second call came at 11:41, more desperate this time. Dad, where are you? I cannot pay rent. I cannot buy groceries. My card was declined at the coffee shop in front of my coworkers. Please, whatever this is, we need to fix it now. I made lunch while the third call played, her voice cracking slightly on the word help. By afternoon, she had apparently called Trent. My surveillance equipment, a simple listening device I had placed near their bedroom window during a reconnaissance visit, picked up fragments of their conversation through the thin walls of the old house. Dad's money is blocked. Raylene's voice carried the sharp edge of genuine panic. How are we going to pay the mortgage? Trent's response came slurred with afternoon drinking. Stay calm, honey. We will find a way out. Maybe we can sell something from the house. This cannot be a coincidence. The bank says access was restricted by the account holder. Her voice rose with each word. That means Dad did this deliberately. You think your father... No, he would not know how to do this. I smiled at that, the thought crossing my mind that this was shaping into a revenge, true story that no one in my family would ever forget. Trent's underestimation would serve me well in the coming weeks. The mail arrived at 3:30. Among the usual bills and advertisements was an official envelope from the Oregon Department of Revenue addressed to Dorian Halden at his business address. The tax investigation had begun, triggered by my anonymous submission. Raylene's phone rang at 4:15. I could hear her conversation through the device as she paced the kitchen of my former home. Dorian, it is Raylene. We have a problem. Multiple problems, actually. Her voice carried exhaustion now, the panic settling into grim determination. The tax office wants to audit your business records, and Dad has somehow locked us out of our bank account. Dorian's response crackled through her phone speaker. That is impossible. Your father does not have that kind of authority. The bank disagrees. They say he is the primary account holder and can restrict access whenever he wants. A long pause. Then Dorian's voice, much quieter. Where is your father now? I do not know. He will not answer his phone. His old neighbor says she has not seen him since the day since he left. Another pause. Raylene, what exactly did we walk into that night? She sank into the kitchen chair, Maribeth's old chair, and I could hear the creak of old wood through my listening device. I am starting to think we severely underestimated him. Wednesday morning brought with it the systematic precision of Phase 2. I arranged Trent's compromising photographs across my kitchen table as if they were evidence prepared for a high-profile court case. 12 high-resolution images of my son-in-law with his auburn-haired colleague captured outside her apartment building, inside her car, and even at a downtown restaurant during what should have been his working hours. Beside the photographs, I placed documentation of his gambling debts, casino receipts, and witness statements from bartenders, all showing a consistent pattern of financial irresponsibility stretching back many months. 2 thick envelopes sat ready for delivery. One was addressed to Henderson Development's Human Resources Department. The other was addressed to Raylene at her office. By 10 o'clock, Trent's supervisor was reviewing an anonymous submission outlining employee gambling problems and questionable use of company time. Included were photos of Trent drinking heavily during lunch hours, the detailed documentation of his mounting debts, and the witness statements about his desperate promises to pay once the house finally sold. Henderson Development prided itself on its reputation for reliability and family values. Trent had become an undeniable liability. At 11:30, my listening device picked up Trent's panicked phone call to Rylene from the Henderson parking lot. They fired me. His voice cracked through the surveillance equipment. Just like that, someone sent them information about my personal life. Rylene's response carried the sharp edge of someone already stretched too thin. What kind of information? Pictures of me at the casino, statements from people saying I owe money. They said I was a risk to company reputation. Trent, we can barely afford groceries. How are we going to survive without your paycheck? But that desperate conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the mail carrier at Rylene's office. 2 hours later, my device captured a very different kind of exchange. I know about your affair, Trent. Rylene's voice had gone deadly quiet. I want everything, half of everything we still have left. The photographs had done their work. Rylene, please let me explain. This is not what it looks like. Photos do not lie, Trent. You have been sneaking around with some woman while I'm trying to hold our family together. Honey, I was desperate. The gambling got out of hand, and she was just, after what we did to my father, and now this. You are just like him, a disappointment. The irony was not lost on me, Rylene, comparing her cheating husband to the father she had betrayed, not realizing that father was orchestrating her husband's destruction piece by piece. Trent's voice turned desperate. This cannot all be coincidence. First, your dad's money gets locked up, then I lose my job. Now these photos show up. Someone is doing this to us. Who would even care enough to destroy us? The silence that followed was beautiful in its implications. Even through my surveillance device, I could hear the moment when realization began to dawn. Your father, Trent, whispered finally. We threw out a man who spent 40 years learning how to solve problems methodically. Rylene's laugh carried no humor. Dad could not organize a birthday party, let alone some elaborate revenge scheme. Then explain how our entire life fell apart in just 1 week. I closed my laptop and poured myself an evening glass of wine. Trent was broken professionally and personally. Rylene now faced financial ruin and marital collapse simultaneously. Both were beginning to suspect the true scope of their miscalculation. Tomorrow, I would begin phase 3. Friday morning arrived with the predictability of engineering principles. They would come for me today, desperate, coordinated, convinced that intimidation could accomplish what careful planning had not. I arranged my legal documents in neat, deliberate stacks across the kitchen table. Bank statements, property investment receipts, attorney correspondence, everything legitimate, everything defensible. At 10:30, the knock finally came. Officer Theron Blake stood on my doorstep with the tired expression of someone assigned to handle yet another domestic dispute call. Behind him, I could see Selma waiting in a patrol car, her face set in victorious anticipation as though she had already won. Mr. Alban Merrick, we received a complaint about you. His voice carried a tone of professional skepticism. The family says you have been threatening them. They want you to leave them alone. I opened the door wider, gesturing calmly to the organized documentation on my table. I have not broken any laws, officer. I'm simply protecting my legal rights as an account holder and property investor. Officer Blake examined the bank correspondence, the attorney letters, the investment receipts. His expression shifted from official concern to mild annoyance. These look legitimate. What exactly are they claiming you have done? Restricted access to my own bank account. Consulted an attorney about my property investments. Reported potential tax irregularities to the appropriate authorities. I handed him Cullen Vexley's business card. You are welcome to verify everything with my legal counsel. 20 minutes later, Officer Blake delivered the verdict to Selma. That single statement would ruin her morning. No evidence of criminal activity. No basis for a restraining order, no police protection for people now facing legitimate legal consequences of their own financial choices. She spent the afternoon walking door to door through my old neighborhood, a one-woman campaign of social destruction. That man is dangerous, I heard her tell Mrs. Waverley through my surveillance equipment. He is threatening our family, trying to take our home away from us. Mrs. Waverley's response was predictably non-committal. Has he actually done anything illegal, Selma? Well, no. Then maybe you should talk to him directly instead of involving the whole neighborhood. Selma's manipulation campaign yielded similar results at each house. Neighbors who had known me for decades were not easily convinced that quiet Alban Merrick had suddenly become a community threat. By 3 o'clock, Dorian had escalated to professional surveillance. Bram Jawling, private detective, parked his unmarked sedan across from my apartment building with the subtlety of a man accustomed more to insurance fraud cases than to systematic revenge operations. I photographed him from my window, noting his license plate and the telephoto lens he had mounted for building surveillance, amateur hour at best. I had been anticipating professional investigations since the very day I moved into this strategically located apartment. His presence actually simplified my next moves. Let him document my routine grocery shopping, library visits, coffee shops. Let him waste Dorian's remaining money on surveillance that would reveal exactly nothing illegal or threatening. My phone buzzed with a text from Cullen Vexley. Family attempted to file harassment complaint. Dismissed due to lack of evidence. All your activities remain within legal boundaries. Perfect. They were panicking exactly as I had calculated. Desperate enemies make predictable mistakes, and the Holden family was proving that engineering principle beautifully. Their coordinated counterattack had accomplished nothing except confirming their complete misunderstanding of the situation. I was not their angry relative, striking out in emotional rage. I was their systematic opponent, and Phase 3 was about to demonstrate the difference. Saturday morning brought an unexpected weight. I sat surrounded by the evidence of my complete victory. Bank statements showing Ralene's restricted access. Photographs documenting Trent's professional destruction. Tax investigation notices targeting Dorian's business empire. Everything I had planned had worked with engineering precision, so why did I feel so empty? While organizing my filing cabinet, I discovered a manila envelope I had forgotten packing. Maribeth's letters to me during our brief separation 40 years ago, back when we had argued fiercely about her mother's interference in our marriage. I opened the first letter with hands that remembered her handwriting better than even the sound of her voice. My darling Alban, she had written in her careful script, anger makes us do things we regret later. I know you want to prove a point to Mother, but proving you are right will not make either of us happy. The words hit harder than I had expected. Maribeth had always seen through my rigid engineering solutions to the deeper human problems underneath. Even when she was furious with me, she never lost sight of what truly mattered. I read letter after letter, each one revealing her gentle wisdom about family conflicts, reconciliation, and the quiet strength of forgiveness. In one she wrote, "Alban, revenge never makes anyone happy, but justice is worth pursuing. There is a difference between making them pay and making things right. Making things right." The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove to Riverside Cemetery. Maribeth's grave sat beneath an old oak tree, her headstone a simple slab of granite with dates that encompassed 37 years of marriage. I had avoided visiting since the funeral 6 months ago, but today I needed her guidance more than I needed pride. "What would you do, darling?" I asked the headstone, feeling foolish yet desperate. "Would you forgive them, or would you fight for justice?" The wind rustled through the oak leaves, and I could almost hear her response. Not supernatural nonsense, just memories so vivid they felt like conversation. "You have already won, Alban. They know they cannot intimidate you. They know they underestimated you completely, but destroying them will not bring our home back or heal Rylene's selfishness." I traced her name carved in stone. "I have destroyed them completely, but it does not feel like victory." Memory supplied her gentle laugh. "Because you are not a destroyer, sweetheart. You are a builder. You have spent 40 years solving problems by creating solutions, not eliminating obstacles." The afternoon sun slanted through the branches, warming the granite beneath my fingers. Maribeth had always been right about these things. She had seen me more clearly than I had ever seen myself. The difference between my engineering mind and my father's heart. "There is a difference between making them pay and making things right," I whispered, repeating her words from the letter. That evening, back in my apartment, I spread my legal documents across the kitchen table once more. But this time, I was not planning another systematic destruction. I was designing a different kind of solution, one that would restore justice without requiring vengeance. I opened my laptop and began typing a very different kind of document. A letter to Cullen Vexley about legitimate legal action for property recovery. Phase 3 would still demonstrate the difference between them and me, but it would demonstrate something Maribeth would be proud of. Monday morning arrived with the clarity Maribeth's guidance had provided. I arranged my documentation in 3 organized stacks: property investment records, financial evidence, criminal documentation, everything legitimate, everything systematic, everything legal. At 9:30, I sat across from Detective Nola Cartrice at the Portland Police Bureau. She reviewed my materials with the professional thoroughness of someone who had seen plenty of family disputes turn criminal. "Mr. Alban Merrick, you have sufficient evidence for criminal charges," she said, carefully studying Dorian's tax documents. "Financial fraud, tax evasion, potentially conspiracy to defraud you of property investments." I handed her the photographs of Trent's gambling activities. "I want justice through proper legal channels, not personal revenge." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Most people in your situation would be screaming for blood. My wife taught me the difference between making people pay and making things right." Detective Nola Cartrice initiated the investigation without delay, moving forward with the professional precision of someone accustomed to complex cases. By 11 o'clock, arrest warrants were issued for Dorian on tax evasion charges. The systematic approach that had served my private campaign now served the cause of legitimate justice with perfect efficiency. The emergency court hearing convened at 1 o'clock sharp. Judge Williams, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed my property investment documentation with practiced authority and professional efficiency. Mr. Alban Merrick invested $23,000 in improvements to this residence over the past 5 years, she stated, her voice steady. Cullen Vexley explained to the court, "He has legal standing as a property co-owner." Judge Williams examined the receipts. The contractor invoices the bank statements one by one. The house is returned to the rightful owner. Defendants must vacate within 48 hours. The gavel's bang echoed like an engineering solution, clicking perfectly into place. By 3 o'clock, the eviction notice was officially served. I watched discreetly from across the street as the sheriff's deputy handed the official court order to Selma. Her face moved through the same progression of emotions I had seen 2 weeks ago: shock, anger, then desperate calculation. But this time, she was facing the full weight of legitimate authority, not merely one wronged engineer. Rylene emerged from the house, my house carrying a suitcase with the mechanical, numb movements of someone in emotional shock. Trent followed behind her, his face hollow, carrying the expression of a man who had lost everything through his own reckless choices. They loaded their car in silence. No arguments, no threats, no desperate attempts at manipulation. Just the quiet, crushing acceptance of people who had finally encountered consequences they could neither intimidate nor bribe nor charm their way around. At 5 o'clock, I stood in my own front doorway for the first time in 2 long weeks. The house felt different, not because they had changed anything inside, but because I had changed everything outside. The afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window exactly as it had on that first day when Rylene called with her so-called surprise. But now the light illuminated justice restored through proper channels, not revenge extracted through systematic destruction. I picked up Maribeth's crystal vase from the dining room table. It had survived their occupation undamaged, just as my sense of right and wrong had survived my temporary descent into vengeance. Tomorrow, Rylene would face her own choices about how to rebuild a life without depending on money that had never truly been hers. Tonight, I was home. Friday morning arrived with the quiet satisfaction of justice properly served. I stood at the threshold of my house, my legally restored house, carrying only a single suitcase and 30 years of vindicated dignity. The locksmith had finished his work the previous evening. These were my keys now legally and morally. The Holden family had left evidence of their hasty departure. Food containers piled in the sink, magazines scattered across my coffee table, Rylene's expensive face cream abandoned on the bathroom counter. They had treated my home like a temporary hotel, never understanding that they were occupying someone else's life. I spent the morning systematically erasing their presence, not out of anger, but with the kind of methodical precision Maribeth would have recognized instantly. An engineer's approach to restoration: assess the damage, prioritize the repairs, execute the solution. The afternoon brought new locks, a modern security system, and fresh flowers for Maribeth's crystal vase. Slowly, the house began remembering who it truly belonged to. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Rylene's number appeared on the screen. Dad. Her voice carried none of the entitled confidence I had heard 3 weeks earlier. Can we talk? I considered hanging up. Then I remembered Maribeth's lesson about the difference between justice and cruelty. We are talking. I realized I was wrong. The words came haltingly, like painful admissions pulled from deep wounds. Everything is falling apart. Trent's drinking again. The Holden family blamed me for Dorian's arrest. I lost my job because I cannot focus on anything. I am sorry to hear that. Rylene. Are you really? The question caught me off guard with its naked honesty. Was I truly sorry, or was I simply satisfied that consequences had arrived exactly as engineered? Yes, I realized. I was sorry it had come to this. Dad, forgive me, please. I know I hurt you, but I am still your daughter. The silence stretched between us like the 18 days since she had last called me family. Rylene, forgiveness is one thing, but trust is something entirely different. You made your choice when you threw me out of my own home. Now live with it. I cannot survive without my money, I finished gently. You survived 34 years learning to depend on me for everything. Now it is time you learn to depend on yourself. Dad, please. I breathed deeply. I spent 30 years giving you everything I had: my time, my money, my heart, my home, and at the first moment it became convenient, you discarded all of it. I paused, watching the afternoon light slant through my kitchen window. That taught me something valuable about what I was really protecting. The line went quiet, except for the sound of her breathing. Goodbye, Rylene. I hung up. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine. Good wine, the kind I'd been saving for a special occasion, and I sat in Maribeth's favorite chair. The house felt different now, not just because the Holden family's presence had been erased, but because it carried something new: self-respect restored through legitimate channels. Maribeth, I said to the empty room, I did this right. Justice prevailed. I could almost hear her gentle laughter, could almost feel her approval in the familiar creaks of our home, settling around me like an embrace. The systematic opponent I had become had transformed into something better, a man who had learned the difference between simply winning and truly being right. Outside Portland hummed with ordinary life. Inside, I began planning not what to destroy, but what to build next. This was not just a story of retaliation, it was a reminder that a revenge audio story can also end with renewal, dignity, and justice when guided by principle. As I reflect now, I see clearly that rebuilding my home and my soul mattered more than dismantling theirs. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson. In the end, we do not heal by crushing others, but by choosing to rise above. If you were in my place, would you forgive or would you fight? If you were forced to choose, what path would you take? Share your thoughts, feelings, and experiences below in the comments. I genuinely want to hear them. Please remember to like this video, share it with others, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. And do not forget to watch the recommended video on the screen. This is one of the stories I am most proud of creating. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.